Well, hello and welcome or welcome back to Read Becca. This was a week of chaos and I was scattered all over the place, and so I picked up and read a lot of disparate things. I watched a bunch of stuff. This is going to be all over the place, I think. So I'm going to try to get through this as briefly and clearly as I can, but I think this is also going to be a little haywire in terms of updating all the things. So we're going to try to get through it. So let's start with the books, of course. I was inspired, coming off of Bridgerton, which I will talk about shortly, to turn to some historical romance. And there is one series that I think of course, that is The Wild Wynchesters by Erica Ridley. Basically, the world that is set up there is almost exactly the world of the show of Bridgerton, where it has been much diversified and a little bit subversive or progressive comparatively, while still being framed within a proper Regency setting. And I really enjoy this series, so I was continuing on with it with the second novella, 2.5, Modiste, Mishap, and also the third novel, Nobody's Princess. So the novellas are self-published and they are not romances. These are more about fleshing out kind of the world and some characters. And in Modiste, Mishap, we are following Sybil Stamper, who's a blue stocking, has recently set up a lending library, and she has an encounter with the local modiste at this lending library, agrees to take her home. And here's the story about how there's been all this contention and kind of a bidding war over the modiste providing exclusive access to the first dress from her collection for the very first ball of the season to an individual buyer. And because of that, there's been a lot of drama in the town. And they're driving back to drop her off at her shop. They arrive there and it's been broken into. So all of the dresses have been stolen. Because of this exclusivity agreement, she had not only the first dress that was going out for the ball, but all the ones she was holding for everyone else that were going to be released after. So there is, because of that, very much espionage, I guess, about the dresses, about who could have stolen them. Could it be a rival? Could it be someone who's upset about this exclusivity agreement? We don't know. So it's a short novella, very much focused on the ladies of this club, the Blue Stockings group, investigating the crime, basically. And it's a fun caper, I would say, is what these novellas are about. So then I jumped to Nobody's Princess. And Nobody's Princess is a romance between one of the Winchester family, Graham, who's kind of the espionage-focused member of the family. He likes gossip, he likes collecting information. This family, the Wynchesters, are all adoptees of the late Baron Vandermeer, and he really encouraged them as all disparate adopted children to him to engage with their own interests and their very unique wild characters to the name. And Graham has always wanted a princess. So he's searching out a cipher that he uncovered where people are seeking this kind of princess in hiding who's gone on the run a bit. And as a result, he encounters this woman who is not in fact a princess, but she is a princess's companion. And she's in hiding because her brothers want to stop her from progressing the things she needs to get done in order to become a royal guard in her country. She's from a small country that left the Netherlands, more or less, that is very abolitionist, anti-slavery in the past, and a little bit more progressive, but they've never had a woman guard before, and so she would be the first. And so that's how we come to encounter our love interest, Kunigunde de Huish. There probably needs more phlegm, but I think that's about as close as I can get. And so Graham and Cooney kind of immediately hit it off and have very similar interests, very similar values. They both really value family and kind of lineage, though not in the way of a typical historical. Cooney is from a long line of guardsmen, and so that's part of why she values that role so much and wants to engage with it. But she's having to do this all kind of on the run in hiding from her brothers. They don't take that side of her seriously. So she's also been the princess's companion. That has shaped her life as well, but it has never hampered her desire to have her independence. So there's a lot between them that is really lovely, but I don't feel like this was very much of a romance, honestly. There is a romance to it, definitely, but I feel like Ridley is maybe going a bit the same direction as Alyssa Cole, where she wrote a ton of romance and started incorporating a little bit more in the plot side and leaning away from the romance. Here, we almost have Cooney get to know Graham's family before him, and spends more of the book on those relationships than the relationship between Cooney and Graham. And there's also a lot of adventures, side adventures, really. So we have Cooney who is doing this task to acquire information in order to become a guard, but we also have a number of different other adventures alongside that Graham and the family are having. We have kind of the primary second adventure, I guess, is the fact that they're approached, the Winchester family are approached by a couple who have lost their adult child working in a negligent factory. And then as a result of them being poor and needing the money, their grandchild, who is a very young child, has gone to work at the factory in really negligent and risky conditions as well. And so they're trying to find a way to fight for their rights, for protections. And so there is a whole like labor dispute discussion there and labor rights that the Winchester family are undertaking. And that's really wonderful, but it feels like a massive aside to the romance, if you are in this book for the romance. So I don't feel this delivered on romance, but I very much enjoyed the book, and I very much enjoyed all of the capers that they were having, but it wasn't really what you expect going in. So I think this was a continued enjoyable read. I've enjoyed everything from Ridley, and I will continue on, but this was not strong as a romance, definitely. So continuing on with a less enjoyable read. I read Civil Disobedience by Henry David Thoreau, and this was ridiculous. It was very short though, thankfully. I picked this up because I have read a number of things that involved Henry David Thoreau. Specifically, I read about Louisa May Alcott a bunch. I read some other things that were set around the same time in Concord and Massachusetts and the grander New England area. So Henry David Thoreau was touring around with this. It's also incorporated in a lot of his collected writings, nonfiction. I think I saw the Poor Person's Book Reviewer read this and some other collected writings and had a similarly negative response. But this was good writing, but a terrible topic. And the fact that it is called Civil Disobedience, I was expecting something very different from what this actually is. This is very much anti-government and anti-tax, I guess, in terms of the civil disobedience that it's talking about. And I knew somewhat to expect that from Thoreau, because he is very famously the guy who was talking about rugged independence while living on his friend's property and having meals brought to him. And this is the same kind of vibe exactly, but amped up to 11, where he is talking through the idea, like he almost goes to a great place, right? He kind of starts from the point of all government is bad, which is not true. Like government is just any aspect of people coming together to accomplish something. You can't function without that, right? But let's give him good faith and think of just state government, right? Okay, big government, bad, whatever. And he goes to the point of saying, you can't just have opinions. You need to act on those opinions and actually be doing something to push them forward. Cool, I'm on board with that. However, he kind of backs down from that. So for himself, he goes, well, if you can't act on things, you have to also spend some time really thinking about the topics, like I have, and that's good enough. So he immediately backs down from his ideals for himself. He also takes this to extremes in a financial way, but doesn't actually act with his hands or do anything ideologically otherwise. He just seems to not want to give money to the government. So he's very opposed to contributing to anything, including education or the well-being of others whatsoever. He even takes that to the point of saying, well, in nature, if things are not successful, they die off, and so that should be with people. So he's literally to that far extreme of, well, failure means you die, and that's okay because it's natural. But literally everything about having a society or civilization is about us doing better than what occurs in nature and us trying to overcome the hardships of nature. So he kind of lost the plot there. There's just so much to this that was absurd. He literally writes a letter to his local government because he's objecting to being taxed for something he doesn't think he should be taxed for, and just writes a formal statement that he refuses to be included in any sort of society that he hasn't explicitly signed up for himself. And he thinks he has done something great by that, but it's clear from what he gets back. They basically say, yeah, okay, whatever, guy, we're going to file this way for the future, but for now, we have to follow what we said previously. So let's just go along with this time. But he thinks he really has accomplished something, and it's ridiculous. So it's made me laugh a lot in those aspects. He also, in closing a bit, he makes clear how not self-aware he is. In fact, I quietly declare war with the state after my fashion, though I will still make what use and get what advantage of her I can, as is usual in such cases. So it's all about benefiting himself. He doesn't have any real consistent ideals or morals. He wants to go around preaching high-handed stuff and get things out of the government if he can, while saying he is very against the government entirely. So that was a big disappointment, and I thoroughly hated it. Then I had a much better experience with a reread, unsurprisingly, since it was a reread. But I had recently picked up The Strange Bird and talked about it in a tag, and I love this little novella, and I predictably loved it again. But the reason I did reread it, despite it recently having come up, is actually that I was browsing the audiobooks on Libby, and the audiobook for this was in the new releases section, or not new releases, but newly added section. So they recently have added it to my library's catalog, and it is narrated by the lovely Emily Rue Zeller, who's one of those audio narrators that you go to just because she has narrated the book, and not necessarily because you were interested in the book itself, because she is just that good, and she was perfect for this. So this is a weird future sci-fi. It's in the new weird genre. This is set inside of and concurrent with the book Born. And there's very little I can say about it. It's really slow paced. You are following the character of the strange bird and slowly with them remembering things, or not even necessarily remembering. The whole middle of the book is the bird having dreams. And Vandermeer already writes things so dreamlike that unpicking that is impossible, because these things are perhaps memories. Parts of them may be dreamlike, but things like a flying bear is something that literally exists in the Born universe, and the bird dreams about it. And so normally in a dream you would discount that, but here you have to accept that that's just reality of the world. So there are all of those very dreamy elements that are unclear and also very, very beautiful. I don't know how he does it, but Vandermeer is just such a lush prose writer that's what draws me in every time. It's amazing that he can write such strange, eerie, and whimsical things. He incorporates technology into the natural in a really wonderful way, and yet it's so beautiful and heartfelt. So there's just a very mundane section that I wanted to read here that I listened to multiple times. On the 10th day, the desert ended, and the dark blue remnants of a vast ocean in retreat leapt up into the strange bird's vision. The ancient waves, the curling salted lip of the bay, and the beaches extending so far outward, strewn with rocks and seaweed. She had never seen anything like it before, except in her dreams. Water had always been what came out of a bottle in the cage, or the tepid moat surrounding the island. But the ocean felt new and exciting, despite being so old, and the brisk wind brought the smell of driftwood and barnacles, the almost spicy but fresh scent of the tidal pools, the funk of the things that had washed up. She perched within the safety of a dense, stickery bush on the edge of it all, and let the wind seek her out between the branches. The city was so far distant, she didn't know if she could ever find her way back to it, and this, too, was comfort. In the crook of a branch, surrounded by thorns, the strange bird slept that night, soothed by the rush and the withdrawal of the waves and the sea salt, the seeking, willful breeze that tugged at her, the first dreamless night, the first night of full sleep that she could remember, without interruption or panic. Such an ordinary thing, and yet such a mercy. It's just so freaking powerful. He has such a way with words, and he really reaches inside of you while creating these fantastical and horrifying worlds. So I need to read more Vandermeer, and as a result I have ordered the sequels to Annihilation, because I have read Annihilation, but there are 2 additional novellas out in that series, and a fourth is coming out this year, apparently, after a long wait, or not really a long wait. I don't think there was a planned fourth book, and now there suddenly is. So I definitely need to read more Vandermeer. I always love his work. And then I lastly picked up Your Driver is Waiting by Priya. I picked this up specifically because Lindy of Lindy's Magpie Reads and Scott of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot talked about it last year as a favorite, and so I knew I wanted to pick this up, and this was a great, great book. This is, I think, a contemporary setting is safe to say, but I couldn't tell if it was a couple years ago as the setting and slightly heightened, or if it is meant to be a couple years in the future where things have gotten worse. I couldn't tell, but roughly contemporary. And we are following a rideshare driver named Damni, who clearly is South Asian. We didn't get specific details, I don't think, about her ethnicity, but race or ethnicity, class, and activism are all strong elements. Labor rights, strong element as well. Her being a rideshare driver is very integral to her characterization and her day-to-day. We're starting out just walking through her days at a mundane level as she is really struggling. Fares have continually gone up and skyrocketed, while the pay that she and her fellow rideshare drivers are taking home is less and less. And that is part of what's great about this, is that everything about her moving through her day is contextualized through her thinking about what she needs to do for this app, more or less. Like how her ratings of things, the times that she needs to be available. So her whole framing of her existence and the world that she moves through is framed by this. I think that was very, very powerful. But she's also an unhinged woman. So it moves from mundane into kind of a little over the top things very quickly. I think for me, if you liked, or depending on how you felt about Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, if you've read that, this is very similar. It goes over the top and everyone involved is quite unlikable or is constantly making bad choices, especially Damni. Damni is kind of a likable, unlikable character. She's making bad choices at every turn. She's making mistakes. And yet I got behind her without supporting what she was doing, if that makes any sense at all. So she is a great character. That, I think, is the thing I would get across. She's a really good character. Early on, she meets a woman, has a chance encounter with this white woman who is involved in some forms of activism and philanthropy, who's wealthy, and it is inconsequential, just entirely, but she runs into this woman again and hasn't been able to stop thinking about her and almost fantasizing about her, and as a result, they start up a relationship. So this does have kind of a sapphic relationship element. And that moves very quickly, to me, a bit unbelievably quickly, but maybe we're playing on the trope of lesbians moving really fast, or stereotype, I guess. And it becomes apparent swiftly that this white woman is very affluent and kind of performative in her activism. Meanwhile, Damni is involved with a lot of other rideshare drivers who have their own forms of activism that really look down on that performative activism. And at every turn, the efforts that white affluent people are making are viewed as kind of exploitative. And that makes sense, I think, in the ways that they're laid out here. I didn't find that character totally consistent in that, because the book wants us to totally discount her as being ridiculous. But for me, like, she is being the kind of clueless, affluent white woman, definitely, yes. But she is also doing actions. She is spending her time and effort, not just her money, and not just being performative, as far as what we are told about her. We don't really see it, but we know that she is doing things. She is involved with social work and things like that. And some things she does were really inconsistent. I could not see anyone involved in social work saying some of the things that she does. But whatever. I was able to overlook that and move on. But I think that maybe did hamper my love for the book a little bit, just because it felt so inconsistent. I think that this is such a punchy, powerful read, though. At the prose level, at the tone level, you really are in for a ride along with this. This gripped me and pulled me along. It started so mundane and just kept ramping up And the commentary on capitalism, on the exploitation of low-level workers, on race and class, and just simply on how we get our points across, or who is willing to hear us and how, is really fantastic. So yeah, this is a very like anti-capitalist, unhinged woman book that I quite enjoyed. So I will be super anticipating anything that Priya comes out with in the future, definitely. So that is everything that I read this week, I think. I started up a whole bunch of stuff and abandoned it because, as I said, chaotic week this week. But in progress, I am actually currently in progress with Wicked still, with the Bar Harbor retirement home for famous writers and their muses, which I had started and paused before, but I'm back at it now. And also the short story collection, Half an Inch of Water by Percival Everett. I enjoyed the first couple stories in that very much. So it has been a very all over the place week, definitely. I guess let's move to things I have been watching, which has also been an absolute ton. I mentioned Bridgerton right up front. I have finished the latest season of Bridgerton, Colin and Penelope's season. I will not go into any details about the plot, really, but I enjoyed this romance a lot. I think I mentioned the last time during the part 1 release discussion that I kind of hated the fact that this season specifically hinges a lot on a big secret between them. And I don't like that. I don't like the lack of communication that happens, or the non-communication in romances. And that's such a big element that bothered me. But I felt like this handled that so well that I was able to get over it, definitely. I also absolutely loved all of the secondary romances. I think there are 3 separate secondary romances, and I loved them all. I thought they were fantastic. So I would be happy to see any of those take over for the next season. Yeah, they were all fantastic. And of course, I love this world that's been crafted in Bridgerton. Shondaland has done a great job with it. And it's just so compulsive. I also love Eloise as a character. She has really grown as an individual and was much more conflicted and complex in this particular season. She hasn't really had any romance so far, and I know there are a lot of like rumors or fan theories, I guess, about what they want for her that is outside of the books, and I too would very much want that for her. So I don't know, we'll see if the show goes that way, but it would be cool if it did. The kind of, I guess villain of the series was very good. Yeah, just all around, it was a great time. So other than Bridgerton, top billing for the week, I actually went to the theater and saw a movie that I talked about a couple weeks ago, Thelma. This was so good. It was head and shoulders above what I even expected. If you are able, absolutely get out and see Thelma. It's the story of an old woman who is scammed. She realizes that she's not going to get her money back. The police are not going to help her. They're just kind of discounting that, hey, you weren't hurt, you're okay, move on with your life. And she doesn't want to move on. She wants revenge. She wants to go get her money back. And that is partially out of the sense that everyone is discounting her because she's an old woman. She's really feeling that infantilization by the people around her, by her family. I don't know which one of them is her actual kid, but the adult children in her life are Parker Posey and Clark Gregg. They are so fabulous. Love both of them. And her grandson, he is very, very involved in her life. And her grandson is so sweet and nice. I really liked him in the show. But he is also newly an adult. And there's this wonderful juxtaposition of the two of them where she is losing her autonomy and feeling very helpless and grasping to hold on to that autonomy. And he is entering into adulthood in his early 20s, and he's having newfound autonomy and feeling helpless because he doesn't know how to use it, basically. He feels like he can't do anything right. And so there's this really lovely juxtaposition of their two situations and a real nuanced kind of conversation in the background about that. So this was a lot more serious. It's a great mix of humor and action with drama and an immense amount of heart. It's hard to hear a lot of the conversations with Clark Gregg and Parker Posey arguing over what to do about mom and not knowing what's right. And they're having those conflicted emotions while also they're having these arguments kind of with her in the background or without including her in the conversation. And that's exactly why she's at this breaking point. And Thelma is played by June Squibb, who I don't think I've seen her face before, but I don't think I had ever seen her in a role this big, and I think she did so fantastically well. She was just great. Yeah, so it was a phenomenal movie. I'm so glad I got out to see it in the theater. It was great. I definitely want to see more movies like this made. So for reasons that we will get back to, I watched a lot of other stuff too. So many things I haven't finished yet, but I did finish Scoop, which is a movie. I thought it was going to be a comedy. I pretty much just added it and downloaded it when it came out a couple weeks ago on Netflix, because it had Gillian Anderson and one of the other guys, one of the teenager characters from Sex Education. And I didn't know, but it also primarily stars Billie Piper, who I love from Doctor Who. And I thought it was a comedy, but this is a movie about the BBC breaking a piece of the story to do with Prince Andrew and Epstein. So it was not a comedy at all, but it was a fantastic film. I really thought it was so well made. The performances, it feels big in scope, but the cast is very small in focus. So you only have a handful of people that are kind of getting any sort of attention in the roles here. But yeah, it was all about performances. It was very thriller styled, while feeling very investigative and grounded, if that makes any sense. So I like that one very much. I also watched Hannah Gadsby's Gender Agenda, which is a stand-up special specifically featuring gender, queer, trans, non-binary comics. And Hannah Gadsby, who I adore, was the host. She did not really do a full set, but it also is closed by Alok Vaid-Menon, who I love. Very funny, very creative. Some of the other comics, I definitely felt maybe they were newer or they didn't have experience at this level, so that kind of showed, but everyone was very funny, I definitely think. I would say if, like, the topic of this special is gender, so if you aren't cool with people talking about that in depth or talking about their bodies in depth, like, that is the topic. So this is not just a general collection of stand-up. They are really hitting on that in detail. But it was super funny and hilarious, and I really enjoyed it. I'm so glad that Hannah Gadsby got to present this on Netflix and did a great job. I was interrupted, and now I don't remember what I was talking about, but I think I was talking about the fact that I have just started the new season of The Bear that came out this week, and I continue to love this show. It's one of the best shows that is running, I think, so off to a good start, definitely. So I think that is it for stuff I've watched this week. Let's transition into the chaotic week that was. I guess starting off with the most obvious. This was an emotional week for me in multiple areas, but I think that for BookTube more widely, this was an emotional past week or so. About a week and a half ago, maybe, I learned about the passing of one half of the Bookish Bryants. Scott passed away, and that felt very sudden. I did not know them well, but I have followed them. I felt like I knew them via videos for multiple years and their events. So that was certainly a blow, but then I also got an email midweek this week that Alice of Alice and the Giant Bookshelf had also died this week. And that also felt like a blow because neither of them were older. It felt so sudden and out of nowhere. Alice, I just had recommended her a book directly, and she responded with such enthusiasm and exuberance about that. She immediately went out and picked up the book, and it felt like just happened, and now she's gone. And again, I didn't know either of these people personally. I had just made those connections through BookTube, and it feels both positive and negative. Like, the positive is that I got to know them by way of BookTube. I got to have those connections, even if they weren't personal friends, and they've been so meaningful to so many people across BookTube, and we got to have that. But the fact that they were both relatively young and now are suddenly gone is just shocking and very emotional. In the more positive but still very emotional column, Dusty, my foster cat, did find an adopter. So I was feeling pretty emotional already because that was the day that I heard about Alice. I was listening to the audiobook of Strange Bird as I was driving Dusty to the shelter for the adopter there. We met with a couple of adopters actually this week, so that added to the chaos, but we finally got a really good committed one on Wednesday who was basically just ready to take him home, who seemed very not only invested but well informed and with the right mindset and exactly the kind of person that I think he would fit really well with. So everything was very positive. But I was driving there listening to Strange Bird, and I had like the last chapter left over afterward, and the last chapter of the book is very emotional. So it was like I was coming out of letting him go to this adopter I was very happy for, but very sad to let him go, and listening to this very emotional ending to a book. So I'm just crying in the car on the way home. And it had been a particularly stressful day as well. They have continued on with road work outside of my house. And Wednesday, that especially chaotic day, they knocked out my internet again. They had knocked it out the previous week. They knocked it out on Wednesday again. So I had to drop everything around lunchtime and go to the office to have internet, and then come back to get Dusty and take him to the shelter, pack up all his stuff and get over there. And so I was just feeling very, very harried that day. And then coming back, I still didn't have internet when I came home. So to wrap things up for work after I got back from the shelter quite late, I wound up having to use my phone as a hotspot just to wrap things up and get things done. However, then they further knocked out my internet twice more, Thursday and Friday, which was miserable. So that was the reason why I had such a weird watching and reading week and was just all over the place, because I didn't have any internet, so I couldn't watch BookTube basically all week. After I have just done that watch later tag where I said I was really caught up, I have now gotten way, way behind again as a result of not being able to watch BookTube for multiple days. So I could pretty much only watch stuff that I had downloaded onto my tablet. So I've been very carefully making sure I have a couple of things downloaded on there just in case. But as well, Wednesday was like the day. I bought a couch. I got rid of my couch in December because I was having my flooring replaced, and then I had a complete kitchen renovation. So I just wanted some junk out that I knew I was getting rid of and replacing, so I had space to put things. And so I finally got a new couch and ordered it, and it was supposed to be delivered on Wednesday. And they closed my driveway for the road work a couple days before, fortunately, so I had time to reschedule. So that's now delayed by another couple weeks. But so that, like, futzing around with calling to try and reschedule things was annoying. So I wouldn't want delivery drivers to be even driving through my neighborhood right now, much less trying to deliver something. It would be very hectic because it is just a disaster out there. And I'm hoping that it will all be done before they are coming back to deliver. But right now it seems like we're close to done as far as them paving things. However, there are two massive holes in my yard and an extension cord run through my yard and across the street to I don't even know where. So that's a lot. So it was just a very all over the place week, especially Wednesday. There was a lot of other things going on and general hecticness with work. The having to drop things because I lost internet in the middle of my workday multiple times did not help at all. It was just a very, very stressful and emotional week. So it was a lot this week. I think that's it for now. I realized that I was griping about the midweek holiday a little bit. I still was happy about the midweek holiday for Juneteenth, but we have another one coming up this coming week. Somehow July 4th is falling in the middle of the week, so we're gonna get a random Thursday off now, which is a little bit better because then you feel like you go into Friday, you get a little caught up on Friday, and then you've got a weekend. So maybe it won't feel like 2 Mondays in a week, but I don't know. And I also know that while we have that holiday in the US, the UK have somehow oddly decided to set their election day on the 4th as well, which seems very ill-advised to me, but that almost certainly means it will be chaos for me the following day in financial markets. So Friday could be interesting. I don't know. Yeah, we will see. But the upcoming week, I am looking forward to having that day off, and a nice relaxing break is certainly needed right now. I feel like every holiday day off I've had, I try to do nothing and it proves to be a little bit of a break, but not as much as I need, unfortunately. Yeah, so anyway, I'm rambling way too much, so I need to leave it there. As far as recommendations this week, I have two quick ones. Number one was a discussion between the editors of a new collection of Ursula K. Le Guin's essays, and I think it's also got fiction in it. So some fiction, some nonfiction, collected on the topic of gender and feminism. And it's titled Ursula K. Le Guin's Space Crone. And her son also was included with the editors in that conversation. And so he brought up discussions about the Le Guin Prize, which I am a strong proponent of, I've really enjoyed, and also an upcoming residency that she was involved in setting up kind of the structure for toward the end of her life. And it sounds like that's going to be going into place very, very soon. So that was interesting to hear about quite a bit. As well, the other recommendation that I have was just an author discussion, and that was with Lisa C. at a local bookstore here. And I've never read any of Lisa C.'s books, but everyone raves about them. I know I need to get them, so I knew I wanted to watch this. So it was a live streamed event that is available to watch back after the fact, so you should definitely check that out. I think that's it for me today. This has been a long and waffly ramble, but I feel like I needed it. So hopefully if you have stuck with me, this was somewhat coherent. I don't know, but I thank you very much for watching.